Okay, so back in the room after a little break. Last session we were working on a little introduction into using the MASH editor, and we were using something called a repro MASH and a distribution node within Maya and MASH. So we'll just do a little quick recap on some of the things that we touched on last session. So you'll remember the top right hand corner of the screen we choose our workplace, so in this instance we're working in MASH. Top left hand corner of the screen we're using the animation toolbar set. Have a little look in the outliner what's in there. We've got our ground plane and area light which we've configured, and over to remember to look at the properties of each of these elements. On the right hand side we've got our attribute editor, and this is where we can control things like intensity, color, spread and whatever of the light. We've got our MASH node here, which can be accessed through the editor here, the MASH editor. And we were using a distribution node inside our MASH network. That's the word I was looking for, network. So there was, I think, a couple other things we used. We used the Hypershade tool, which to me and you just means material, but Hypershade I guess sounds groovy or something. So rather than call it the material editor, we'll call it the Hypershade. And when you click it, this is the window that pops up, and we were just using standard surface, Arnold standard surfaces. I think that's all we did. We set up a couple of materials, one for the cubes, one for the ground. I'll just minimize that. And what we're going to do today is just extend a little bit of the way that we can view this. So the first thing we want to probably do is recount the fact that I'm just working across 90 frames. So if you haven't got your time, the length of your animation set yet, you can do it in these two boxes here. This one controls the overall length of your animation. This one and the one on the left controls the length, the amount of the animation that's actually displayed in the timeline. Oh yeah, we also looked at this little fellow down here that's being chased by the cog. So inside our preferences, I think we went to, I think the only thing that we probably changed was the time slider, and here we set the frame rate to 24 frames a second. I think we did, and we also changed the playback speed to 1/24 as well. Just a quick recap on things that we've done previously. Okay, today what we're going to do is we're going to create a camera, move the camera in the scene, and also look at the curve editor a little bit as well. Okay, so the environment is pretty much set up. We actually already have a camera in there called Perspective 1. I'll just delete that and start again. So just select it and delete it. So from my scene, basically I'm just rotating to a point that I'm happy with, just as a kind of like start frame, if you like, a camera start frame. And from there I'm just going to go to the view menu, and in the view menu I'm just going to choose create camera from view. It appears in the outliner as Perspective 1, and I'm just going to double click on it and call it main cam. Okay, so that becomes my main cam. You can change the viewport to reflect what this main cam is actually seeing by going to panels, perspective, and in here you can choose either the original perspective window or your new camera perspective, and you can also choose the orthographic views like front, side and top. Okay, so we'll probably be in and out there a little bit. I think the other thing that we did last week once we'd set our camera up is, maybe we hadn't set a camera up, but I'd set a camera up and I was using the resolution gate to show, that's that little button in there, to show me, this one here, the resolution gate, just to show me what will actually be displayed when the animation is rendered. Okay, so just going to look at the camera for a moment. So clicked on main cam and I've gone over across to the attribute editor, and over here I've got a focal length of 35. Now a focal length of 35 is considered to be a kind of normal human eye kind of view, field of view, if you like. A focal length of 35mm on a normal photographic camera renders a field of view close to the human eye, and that's around about 50 degrees roughly. Our feeling, in further research that I've read, a focal length of 40 is actually closer to the real human eye. So anyway, I tend to like 40mm. You might tend to like something a little bit wider, like a 24mm lens. It's entirely up to you, but I keep it somewhere between 24mm focal length and 40mm focal length for this exercise. Okay. Now, the camera that we've created at the moment, it's kind of, in fact, I'll show you where it is in the scene. Let's go across to our quad menu view, and if we zoom out a little bit, it'll be somewhere in the scene. There it is, way out there. And what we're going to do, the very first thing that we'll do is we'll just kind of get a little bit of a handle on that position and display of that camera. So I've got it selected currently, and again inside the attribute editor I'm going to go to main cam, and here it's saying that its position in the world is at 45, 34, 22. That's X, Y and Z. It's got a rotation value already set on it, and it's got a scale of 1, 1 and 1. I'm just going to change those scale markings to say 4, 4 and 4. It doesn't actually change the way that the camera renders anything. All that it does is gives us a little bit of a easier handle on grabbing the camera. Okay, now you'll notice it is at this point just a camera in the scene with nothing else. Now for this exercise I think it would be helpful if it had a target as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the main cam shape, and underneath controls we're going to choose camera and aim, and when we do that, a target or an aim point, if you like, appears. And if I go back over to my outliner and open up the little plus key beside main cam and click on main cam aim, now I can move its position to the center of the world space. Okay, so now however I move my camera, the camera is always going to be looking at that central position. Okay, so if the camera moves, that's fine, but what I'll do is, just to show you what's happening here, I'll go up to the panels, and for this particular window up here I'll go to main cam, and now you'll see that whenever I move this camera, it's moving around, but it's focusing right in the middle, because that's where we put its target. Okay, so we're going to experiment with that kind of movement. We can decide to kind of like zoom in, etc. We'll make a simple animation, and again we'll just we'll practice the process of rendering the animation out. Okay, so let's get our start position. Where do we want to start that camera? I think I'll start it somewhere about there. Okay, and make sure that the playhead is at 1. Make sure that the camera is selected, and just hit S, and that creates our keyframe for the camera at frame 1. Now if I go say to frame 45, which is 46 even, or 45, which is roughly halfway through the animation, and where do I want the camera to be at that point? Maybe in amongst a little bit further in there, somewhere like that. So let me just hit another S, and I'll go all the way to 90, and this time round I'm going to move the camera in. Where do I want it to be? Maybe up here a little bit, and up there a little bit, something like that. Kind of, sort of roughly where it was before, not quite, but anyway, I'll hit S again, and there we go. Right, okay, so we've got 3 keyframes for the camera's motion. So if I just activate that window by clicking in it and hit S, hit the play key, you'll see now that the camera is moving in and around. Okay, so it's kind of swooping through. Now that's absolutely fine. We've only created 3 keyframes, kept it really nice and easy. Now, what would be very nice is if you, like I, at home or in one of the rooms downstairs, had a split screen or a double monitor, and you could see that on the my right hand monitor, I've got something called a curve editor in the window. And if you haven't got it, all you've got to do is go to your Windows, Animation Editor, and choose Graph Editor. They call it Graph Editor. I'm used to calling it a Curve Editor, but there we go. Curve Editor in 3ds Max, Graph Editor in Maya. So when you click it, this will appear in your window. I'll just drag mine into the window, and I'll just select the main camera, and what it does is it displays the motion path, if you like, or the curves of the camera's animation. And this is a really nice place to do a little bit further editing. So I've just clicked and dragged it, and in here I'm just going to can I get rid of a few of these windows? I can just drag that down so you can see the effect. That's good enough. Okay, it's difficult on one monitor, isn't it? But okay, we'll go with it. So the camera's selected, and these curves represent the motion path of the camera. So they're really helpful for refining your animation. So let's do them one at a time. So let's go to the translate x-axis. So you just click on it on the left hand side, and now we're just dealing with one curve and in effect 3 keyframes. So I'm going to get my move tool, I'm going to select that keyframe, and if I move that keyframe, in effect you can see down at the bottom I'm moving the camera at the same time. So it's a really simple way of controlling and refining your camera's position during an animation. And what I would say is it's a very powerful tool. We can do a lot with it, but today let's just get used to the basics of it. So with these little keyframes, occasionally you're going to want to press this button here, display curve in absolute view. It just basically occasionally you'll zoom in too far, and then you'll want to zoom out and see the full curve, and it's a very useful button to know about. A bit like when we've modelled previously in Max and we've used Bezier curves, these curve handles control the way that the camera moves through the keyframes. So you can have it kind of quite angular or quite smooth. You can have it speeding up or slowing down as it goes through the keyframe. So let's just play that now and see how that affects it. Okay, so if I want to just move that in a little bit. That's kind of nice, a lot of motion there. The only thing I'm not liking is at some point about frame 50, it's dropping down to the point where I'm getting a glimpse of the horizon, if you like. Now, I can't quite remember from my render whether or not that would in fact already be black, so we don't need to worry about it. But it's possible that I want to just lift that a little bit more and see less of that horizon. I mean, I could speed the whole thing up at the beginning and then slow it down at the end just by moving that keyframe, or the reverse. It's quite nice actually in reverse. Okay, so that's on the translate X. Then I've got the translate Y. It's the same kind of thing, so but obviously on a different axis. I'm just going to experiment with each of those keyframes to see what's a nice position for them. So you get the picture. So obviously, if I think if I click off and go to main cam, you get to see them all together side by side. I haven't changed the rotation and scale. I'm just dealing with the translations at this point. And that's looking okay to me. I might, let's see, just bring that up a little. No, actually I don't want it too close at the end. I want to go back to the translate Y, and I think I want to lift it up a little bit at the end. So I'm a little bit higher, a little bit further up. Let's try that. Yeah, that's quite nice. Okay, so in your animation, I want you to do the same. Create the three keyframes, go into the curve editor, and just experiment moving those keys, and deciding where they should be. Maybe looking at the curvature of the handles. So just before you go off and do your little bit of experimentation, just you might want to take maybe the X, Y or Z central keyframe and just try out some of the other interpolations of the curvature. So we've kind of got like different steps. We've got a very angular step, a nice soft curve, something called a linear, which will give you a much sharper jolt between the arrival and departure of the camera through that particular node. So it becomes more pronounced in the way that it changes position. Although it's not that dramatic there, truthfully. You can break these tangents as well, but that's for another tutorial what we get into, and we can break them, copy them, unify them, etc. But that's for another one. At the moment, let's just experiment with an introduction to the curve editor, an introduction to setting keyframes for your camera, and we will then finish by just rendering it out. So just to render it out, just double check that from the last time you attempted this, you have got your settings set up correctly. So let's just go into the render settings, display render settings here. And I was using JPEG, although if you want a higher resolution, it is a higher resolution file, then we would use a TIFF or an EXR. But I think for this exercise, JPEG is going to be fine, but if you want a bit more quality and you have the time to kill, use TIFF or EXR, but JPEG for now. Whether or not I put the dithering on, I've got the quality at 100, I think that's fine. I left the frame padding at 3 because that's the way that I control the numerical information up here. So 001, that's frame padding of 3. If it was 4, it would be 0001. Remember that the naming convention is important, so it's name underscore hash hashtag, so that hashtag will have a number of it, like frame number 1, number 2, number 3, and then it'll say dot extension. Okay, so that's the one I'm going for. I mean, they all work, except that would just give you a single frame naturally. But in terms of your naming method, I think that one's pretty straightforward and clear and easy to read, so I use that. Start frame, end frame, don't forget to choose those. Which camera are you going to render? We're going to use our main camera. Are we using an alpha mask channel? We're not using an alpha mask channel, so I don't need that. I've chosen a preset of the HD 540, which is, I think it's a 960 by 540. Resolution 72 dpi. Those settings will be fine. I think inside the Arnold renderer I've got the camera AA set to 6 to give me a little bit more quality, and everything else is just set to 2. And I think in terms, it's a balance, as with everything, between the quality and the time that you want to spend rendering it out. So I think they're going to be fine for what we're doing at the moment. We probably, haven't changed our light settings since last week. I'll just close down this graph editor, I'll stick it on the other screen. We probably haven't, and in which case we've got our samples still set to 3 for our lights, I imagine, and if you haven't, then it's probably good to do that. Okay, so we've got the settings established. Now it's a case of just going to render sequence, and in the output file location determine where it is that you want it. So Maya normally puts it inside the default images folder, and inside there you can make a new folder and call it, or not necessarily inside there, somewhere of your choosing, you can call a folder and you can say mashanim cam test 01. So that's going to be my folder. I can tell it that I'm happy to put it in that folder, and once the folder has been defined, I make sure that the right camera has been chosen, all rendered enabled layers, ignore all local, everything's fine. Add to render view. I don't think I need to click any of those. I think it's a case of render, sequence, and close. So I'll sign off here. I think that process is fairly straightforward, gives you good space to experiment, should return you just to the area that we were discussing earlier in terms of dynamics within the within Mash and Maya. Okay, I'll hit render, sequence, close, and see you later. Alright, bye for now.